Episode number 8 takes you inside the inner workings and leadership of our volunteer firefighters. You will see over 30 memorable fire photos, some going back over 40 years ago.
When I was a kid, you oftentimes would have a barn fire maybe, and you would always know where it was, because it was so much open land at the time, so many farms around it.
The way they were called back then, it's really strange because if the fire whistle went off, okay, we could hear it because we lived in town. We had a list of people to call on the phone. That was the only time I was allowed to use the phone, and it was a party line. Our next door neighbor, the Kings, were on the party line, and I can remember distinctly calling up, picking up the receiver and saying, there's a fire, the fire whistle's going, and they would immediately hang up because they knew I had to make all these phone calls to alert firemen who were down on Old Limekilled Pike or couldn't hear the fire whistle. There was no other way to communicate other than by a phone. You didn't have pagers or anything like that. That's how they communicated.
So
Get people to get to the fire company.
So what would that be? The 1950s?
No.
Yeah.
No, it even lasted longer than that. I know when I first moved in with George and with George Carlin and Jane Carlin, they still had the bell system.
Yeah.
The bell system
yeah.
were in certain houses
Right.
where the phone company would activate the bell, and then those folks would get on the phone and call people. They had predetermined people to call.
Well, that was after the system that I was talking about.
Exactly.
I mean, I was really young because I
Yeah.
remember this.
Yeah.
Because I moved from downtown Chalfont when I was in second grade.
Yep.
Second or third grade, so I wasn't very old. I was not allowed to touch the phone, only in those circumstances.
Yeah.
Was I allowed to use that phone so I could call firefighters, and that was the only way that they had of calling them in when they couldn't hear the fire whistle. I mean, how far did the fire whistle go? Not very far.
Right.
So every week there was a list that you knew who was local in town.
Well, you knew it all the time.
You knew it.
You knew
It
it.
didn't change. It didn't change unless there was a new member. It was there by the phone, and there were people I had to call. Don't ask me who they were. I can't remember. But at that point, there was, my number was 0849, so there were only 4 numbers I had to call.
Okay.
That was it, 0849. That was my number. That was our number in the house. So I had to dial 4 numbers to get to the next person.
But Joe, the standard procedure was if you heard the fire siren, you went to the firehouse.
Yeah.
It's still that way. If you hear a fire siren, it doesn't make any difference if it's during the day or in the evening or the middle of the morning or late at night, you went to the fire station. Didn't make any difference if you were having holiday dinner or Thanksgiving dinner, and how many times did that happen, right? You just went.
That's right.
You didn't ask. And if you were working, if you heard about it and you could go, you went. But it all depended. Like in Joe's case, in my case, I was working in Philadelphia. Now Taffy might call me and say, you got a big fire, like Hartzell's was one. So when I came home, I just went to the firehouse. Yeah, it's just one of those things.
I will tell you, he spent many an hour at the fire company.
Yeah.
Be it on the ambulance. He's holder of the David Burpee Award for his service.
What's the David Burpee Award?
Volunteer. At that time, it was emergency responders. I don't know how it's branched out now. And I don't think it's David Burpee anymore. I think it's the Burpee Family Award,
Well, it's still given today. The Central Bucks Chamber
Chamber of Commerce.
currently sponsors it, but at the time it was set up because of one of the EMTs, actually it was Linda Goodwin, at that time her son was killed in an emergency issue, and she started that award. And she was involved with it till the chamber took it over, and they still do it today. So it's a firefighter of the year, or EMS of the year. EMS responder. Yeah. And there's a banquet, usually in October.
Yeah.
You went to, right?
So you were both fire and EMS.
Yeah.
Not, yeah, he was a volunteer on the ambulance, he was not.
I didn't like to drive. I stayed clear of driving.
And the other important thing was the radio. You had to be on the radio,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And you had to run the siren and the horn. That's an important job too. You realize the driver's driving, but the person next to him is operating the horn and the sirens and keeping an eye on everything. It's a big job.
Yeah. I remember one morning we had a fire about the middle of the night. And at that time, Art was driving. He was driving and I was riding shotgun, and we were going up through town. Not a soul around anywhere. And he said, "Blow the siren." I said, why blow the siren? There's nobody around. He said, "Oh, I have to get up. Everybody gets up."
It
So,
was
yeah,
probably mid-70s, because I was in the fire company.
you were.
My
Oh, okay.
brother-in-law George was in the fire company. And he got a bad case of poison ivy on that fire. Yep, he'll tell you.
I bet you he did. That one was bad. I
And this-
remember that. Maybe because it was so close to the firehouse, it just.
Yeah.
You remember fighting that, Joe?
The mill fire? Yeah.
Yep.
It happened on a Sunday.
Yep.
And burned to Monday. Burned and burned.
There was several, we fought that for several days.
Yeah.
We finally,
Yep.
Did you have protective equipment back then, or?
well, we didn't have what we have today. Why was it difficult? Well, position for one thing, and the what was in it was bad because everything in it was a mess.
There was a lot of straw in there too, wasn't
A
there?
lot of grain, and I think it kept on Wasn't there a lot of grain in there, Daddy? And it kept on refiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, they think they'd have it out, and
Yep.
up it we go again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember going in there on Wednesday morning, and the place was just loaded with maggots. You don't get scared of fires, you get scared afterwards. After you get to thinking about it, then that's when you get scared.
Our company, basically, in every firehouse is like a brotherhood. You know, it's like a family. You don't always get along with your family, But eventually you fight and you argue, but usually you work things out, and you learn to work with everybody here. And I think the reason the fire company lasted long is because the people that were running it had to have respect and understanding and some kindness. And I think that's one of the main things. You didn't have to be fire smart, you had to be people smart. You had to learn how people were and how to, that's how you learn to treat them, and that's what kept them around.
I think we were fortunate that there was a lot of businesses in town, a lot of people actually worked in town and were allowed to leave their work to go to fire. And that's when Chipper was in business down there. We got 5 or 6 guys out there every time the whistle blew, which was really a big help to the fire company. Sam, he would run it from his office. When the whistle blew, I left Mark's garage.
I came from Ashland,
By county, and a lot of businesses have helped to actually allow the fire company to continue because they allowed the people to leave work, which made it work.
So it was always been a good, strong community support then.
Yes, it has.
A couple of the municipalities, they would let their men come out, like New Britain Township. We had 4 guys at one time on the road crew. Chalfont Borough would let the one guy come out that was a member someplace else, but he came out during the daytime.
Well, I have to tell you why I joined the fire company in the first place back in the 60s. And I moved in and I was a stranger in town. Bought a house over on Moyer Road. And one night the fire whistle went off and I looked out the window and up the street there was a house on fire. So I went up there, and just as I got there, Bill Vaughn, who I will mention some names, but any names I mentioned became lifelong friends as a result of being in the fire company. And he was carrying a little boy out. And so I thought, I think this may be something I want to get involved in. And so Dick Schaefer, who was my neighbor 2 doors up the street, I asked him how I could get in and become a member of the Chalfont Fire Company. And he says, well, you have to have a sponsor, and I'll sponsor you. And so we went to the meeting, and at that time it was tough. I mean, you were in with all native-born Chalfont people who grew up together, they raced cars together, they knew each other, and all of a sudden, in comes a stranger. And so we got to find out what he's all about, you know what I mean? And so you just had to prove yourself. I mean, you're not coming in there and you're going to change this and change that, because there were written rules and bylaws, but then there were also unwritten rules of things that you did and things that you didn't do. And so if you got out of hand, the worst thing that could happen to you is that you would be invited to a chief's meeting once a month. And you know, if you're going in there, there's trouble. And so people belong to the fire company, they wanted to be there, and so they would do anything to keep them. But one thing that kept an unwritten rule that kept the fire company together, and that was John Greenlee, because he was there all the time. If you did something wrong, you'd hear about it. If you did something right, you'd also hear about it.
Oh, man. Yeah. Thank you, Ted.
Oh, yeah. That went a long way.
To be successful, you had to be around all the time.
Yeah.
That's how you were successful.
Thursday night was fire company night. And unless your wife was giving birth to another child or something, maybe you would still be there. But that was just an unwritten law. Thursday night, we're going to practice, and we're going to make sure next time the fire goes off, you're going to know what to do.
Talk about the auxiliary. They support when the firemen are at fire for a while, or?
We do. We hold fundraisers and then present the money that we've raised throughout the year at the annual banquet.
First officer there is to assess and take a look around the place, 360 around the whole property, and basically see what the exposures are and what's burning and what they might, and how much water they might need or how much help they might need. Yes, they assess this all in a couple short minutes, and then when the first truck comes, the first crews off the truck will take a line, and the officer that's there would guide them to where they need to go, whether it be the front door or a ladder to the, ladder to the second floor and go through a window or, so.
I think what you're saying, every call is different.
Every call is absolutely different.
There's no two alike.
A lot of training, a lot of years of training.
First-in officer also assesses whether anybody's still in the building or not. That's the most important thing that he has to determine.
Momentous fire that I can recall was St. Jude's Church. Got on the truck when we got there. It wasn't the library, it was a sanctuary. No fellow firefighter and myself were right in the front of the church, streaming a hose through where the stained glass windows were. Whenever the fire was knocked down, we decided to go in and see if there were any hot spots. Well, we're going in the one side door, and one of the parishioners says, be very, very careful because the organ is up on the balcony. Well, when we walked in, there was no balcony. The organ was on the floor in front of us. And we went through putting out hot spots throughout the sanctuary area. And the fire was so intense, it burned the pews down to probably 10 or 12 inches from the floor. Because they were all wood, they all burned except about 12 inches off of the floor. And the cause that they determined was the sacrificial candles that they burned when people say prayers and things like that. It was in a certain part of the church, and just the heat from the candles after, I think it was maybe like 20 years, set it on fire, and the whole building burned.
Yeah, they get dispatched the same way, and they come out with it whenever it's a fire call. They come out. If you're available, you come out and help direct traffic mainly. Whatever else is needed, traffic or people, traffic, crowds. There could be big crowds. Yeah, there's almost always somebody lingering around trying to get around back to take a picture or whatever. Can't let them do it, that's all.
You have any memories of problems you had to solve with people getting too close to a fire watching it, or?
Yeah. I remember Diane, it was a plane accident up in Hilltown. Plane accident, her holding a sheet up so people couldn't take pictures from far away or whatever. On Saturday afternoon. Many years ago.
And one of the things I like to say about the fire police too is and we've always been very lucky because Chalfont's always had probably the most fire police in the entire area.
Right.
One of the biggest, largest group who have stuck here the longest. So I think that says a lot because they spend a lot of times far away from home now on shut down roads or fire scenes, so they really give a lot more time. So firehouse is a very difficult place at times to be. The people who have a lot of years are sitting here are tough people.
It was more that way than it is now.
Difficult to be an engineer here. You're in the 80s.
It's hard to get into the position.
Yeah,
Nobody
there was a
wanted
lot
to give it
of,
up.
when I first came, there were 75 active people, and you had to fight to get a spot on the truck. 1986 come along, and laws changed, and you were no longer allowed to ride the back of the truck, and the membership has dwindled since. It's kind of funny how it almost seems like that was something that was a big deal. But back to being an engineer, if you want to be an engineer here, when you have to be tested and know where everything is on the compartment, everything basically about the truck, you got drilled by all the chiefs. Any question they could think of. Sometimes it'd be an hour. And it was if you knew the truck, it wasn't a big deal, but it just in itself was very intimidating. Because...
You had Kurt, John.
Yeah, but we used to take them out on the street. That way you're...
Shinbone Alley.
What Shinbone Alley? I mean, it's the street that goes like
Maple
that.
Avenue.
Maple Avenue, and you made them stop the truck in the middle of that hill and get started again. When would they ever see something like that?
And they were stick shifts then.
Yeah, they were stick shifts.
No Nobody can drive a stick shift in this company now.
When was that, back in the 60s or
Up to the
70s?
No, I was an engineer then, so it was in the 80s.
It was in the 80s,
The last standard
even
shift
into
truck,
the 90s.
the last standard shift truck we have is a 78.
Every truck was a
78
shift.
or 79 Mac.
Yeah, Mac was the last
Mac
standard
with the,
shift
the
truck.
Mac with the reel.
Yeah, that was the last stick shift truck.
The last truck I tested on was with Kurt Martin. And for some reason, the trucks were lined up on Railroad Avenue. And he made me parallel park between two trucks. And I did it on the first shot. I still don't know how I did that.
One thing we all learned, if you were around during the daytime, and John was the chief, you get in there, get it done, let's go back to work.
Right.
You didn't play games, you did the job, and returned to work, your normal work.
Almost everybody here was around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or worked in the, you know, so.
Right.
And it was a different game during the day. Things were completely different rules from the day to night.
Everybody had a job.
Yeah.
We had a house fire in Brittany Farms, bedroom and contents. And he decided he was going to fight it from outside. So we got a ladder up, he grabs the hose line, takes it up. Engineer can't get water. So there's a few curse words coming down from the second floor. And the next thing, he's coming down the ladder, going across the front lawn, yelling at the engineer like hell. Walks over, fires the truck up, gets water in the hose, goes back up the ladder and puts the fire out.
That's right. Nothing made me more mad if I couldn't get water. God, they used to make me mad.
So when I became an engineer, I promised myself two things. One, I wasn't going to miss any shifts, and second, I was never going to wait for John for water. So I've been an engineer maybe 5-6 years, and we had a little Chevy, and we went up to a big field fire up above the lake. Well, the lake wasn't there then, I don't think. And we ended up putting two hose lines together, two of the booster lines together. And he said, I'm ready for water. I couldn't get water out of the truck. And I thought, oh Christ. So I told him, I said, something's wrong. I said, I can't get water. Nothing's wrong with the damn truck. I said, okay. So down over the hill he comes. He tries to get water. He can't get water out of the truck.
Tank was dry, right?
No.
Yeah.
Here, the valve on the water, on the fill from the pump, from the tank to the pump came unhitched. So he had to climb under there. He fixes it up and he says, there, he says, don't touch it. So then he went back up, supervised the fire. You were chief then, I think.
I don't remember.
We get a lot of assists with the ambulance, whether it be CPR or someone heavier.
They run two people, which is standard, but two people can't lift somebody that's
Get somebody
400
that's,
pounds,
300-400.
especially when you're trying to bring them down the steps.
That was the lake is one of the things that I always was very frustrated about, because we would get called for marine rescues there long before we had a boat. And we all go over there and we'd stand on the shore and the guy'd be maybe a quarter mile away and there we were. There's nothing he could do.
Waiting for Point Pleasant to come.
Wait for Point Pleasant to come. And to me that seemed so frustrating that we couldn't do anything. That's how the boat came about. 2015. This truck here, there isn't that many people left that can drive this truck. Unsynchronized transmission, 6-cylinder, no power steering, manual steering.
Power steering's in the arms.
Yeah, you better have some arms.
Armstrong power steering.
Or just know how to get the wheels moving right.
Well, I was driver training, and I asked Sam to come up and take me out driver training, and he gets to the station and realizes we're going out in this one. And it was a little cold.
Oh, yeah.
He thought we were going out in one of the cabs.
We used to go down Main Street when when we were allowed to ride on the back of the truck, and we take the spotlights here and shine them on the street lights and put all the street lights out all the way up and down Main Street. He used to get so damn mad he could see straight.
They were funny days because there was one cop in town.
Today,
And he shut down at midnight. I do have one. I could testify on an arson case where when I was a deputy chief up at the High Point, disgruntled employee came back in the middle of the night, set 2 or 3 fires in the building, and left. And we got called for an alarm there, and we had these fires burn. We put them out. There wasn't a ton of damage, but the building, it was massive. It's gone now, but it was a massive building, and it was very difficult to get the smoke out of it. And it turns out they did investigate, and they caught who it was, and I had to go testify against him in court.
He had busted up the whole place. He tore the place apart and then tried. He was smart because he lit the fires in a sprinkler building, and the sprinkler system put the fire out. But it had smoke.
Smoke
damage.
Worst of it is when I was sitting there ready to testify, and I really looked at him really close, and I looked at the family, and I realized I knew his mother. And I was like Rodney Dangerfield. You
testify,
my collar's a little tight.
Oh yeah.
Get called for fire company. Get called for everything. We get called for anything and everything. Always was like that.
Another big fire for the fire company was a Warnawick farm, which was up on Sellersville Road on the other side of New Galena. And there too, they had pigs right under the overshoot like and all. And I remember Lee King, it was Easter Sunday, and he had a brand new suit on. And in those times, you put boots on. They didn't have the complete outfits as much as they do now, but you had the boots you put on and all. But I remember that wallowing in this pig pen with the water that was getting it all muddy and all. I remember he ruined the pants of his brand new suit, supposedly trying to rescue these pigs. So yeah, barn fires were big, and grass fires. They had loads and loads of grass fires in those times because you had so much open space that you don't have now.
Basic firefighter now is 200?
Around 200 hours.
200 hours of training.
More.
And how do you ask somebody to leave their family?
Weekend.
It's a lot of times it's a
Saturday,
weeknight, Saturday or Sunday. It's a lot to ask. That's mainly why you don't get anybody to stay. The training it's crazy. The state raises the bar on it, And the ones who do the training for the county now, no education. What do you think they do? They just everything they want to educate. Everybody's got to have more education. Never enough. The experience, really, I think. You can be educated all you want and sit in classes. It's getting out there and doing the jobs where you learn it. That's where it is.
Yep, exactly right.
Like the bad times of fires, when we've had a couple deaths, civilian deaths. Like one night, I was chief, Denny was deputy chief. We had 2, husband and wife. And it was before 8 o'clock in the night. They had a fire in their house, and they were upstairs in the bedroom, and they called it in, but they didn't make it out. I knew the guy, Denny knew him, he had lived up the street. We had a couple other ones.
We had another one in
I drug him out.
back of the Little Giant out in Brickborough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Then we did a drill afterwards, and we took
Smoke detectors
detectors around all the houses, make sure that the residents had smoke detectors.
A lot of times people forget their smoke detectors. Luckily today's smoke detectors, most of them are 10-year lithium or they're 110
and you can't take the batteries out of them.
And in today's world, anything that, like townhouses, they're sprinklered. The new ones have to be sprinkled by the state law and all the codes. Remember, everybody's running out of the building and we're running in.